I just got done fixing that transfer case, so now I'm trying to chase down this oil leak. So what I think what's actually going on is it's not an oil leak, I think it's a diesel leak going into the oil, and it's overflowing the oil and coming out the vent tube. And I checked the oil recently and it was overfull by a lot, and my mileage is down quite a bit for some reason. So I'm thinking what I have here is actually a cracked injector that's going right into the oil. And so what I'm going to do here is take off the valve cover, and I'm going to try to run this and see if I can see where it's leaking. Sometimes they will spray and it'll look like smoke coming out, but sometimes you can't see it and it just kind of dribbles out. So in that case, I'm going to use some dye and put it through the fuel system and then look for it with a UV light. That way I can see where it's coming from. I don't know what happened to this, but you can see this is really enlarged. It doesn't even come close to fitting over this anymore. So if anything was coming out the vent tube, it was just spilling all over the top here. But one nice thing is, you can see right here, 12, 5, 17 injectors. 3, 4, 5, 6 are new and 1 and 2 are used. That's when I was having problems starting this truck, and I had a diesel shop that specialized in this kind of stuff, testing injectors. They tested them, and they found that 4 of them were really bad, and 2 of them were still functional. So I just had them replace the 4 at the time because they're kind of expensive. So I'm really thinking that either cylinder 1 or cylinder 2 is going to be our culprit here, because the other 4 are new. So I gotta tell you guys right off the bat, I'm not an expert with fuel systems in a diesel motor. So bear with me, we're gonna learn this together. So what I did is buy this dye. It's like a UV dye. It's meant for engine, transmission, fuel tank, and power steering systems. And I got this UV light here. I think it's a black light. So what I'm gonna do is put a little bit of that dye inside of the fuel filter, and hopefully then it will bring the fuel up, and if it's leaking out of one of these injectors, it should show up around the injector. So let's try that. So you can see it's already starting to work right there. Just that little bit that I spilled over the side, you can see it. You got to turn the light off to see it, but you can see it. So let's get this started up and see if we can see a leak. Alright, so I think I found the problem. After starting this truck several times to see where this leak is, it's finally started to show up a little bit. So it's almost hard to tell because the oil in general just kind of looks like this weird fluorescent color, but it's not nearly as fluorescent as something like that. That's just pure yellow. So I knew that injectors 3 through 6 were already replaced. 3, 4, 5, and 6. These two were not replaced, so I was trying to focus my efforts on those two. And what I have found, finally, and it's really hard to see, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it. But you see how this fluid changes colors right there? So right there is a little bit darker, and that's a lot lighter. It's starting to mix with the oil that's on top of this head already. So you can see that it's just a lot lighter right there, a lot darker right there. But actually the first thing that I found was right there. If you look really closely, on the side of that injector, you'll see just a little sliver of yellow on the hold down. And it's something that you'll miss so easily if you're not paying attention. I don't even know if it's showing up on camera, but it's there. It's leaking a little bit on this side of the injector. And it's already to the point where it's starting to make its way into the rest of the oil and mix with it. Barely even noticeable. I'm going to run this for a little bit longer and see if I can replicate that a little bit better. Alright, so you can see again, the oil right there is much darker than that oil. That oil has a whole bunch of brighter fluorescent color to it. And while it was running, I saw it running down the side of that injector. You can see there's evidence of it now, but I could literally see it flowing out of the side. So that injector is definitely damaged in some way. I think it's probably cracked on the body. I can't see the crack, but I can see the stuff coming out. So let's check these other injectors. I don't think there's anything wrong with them though. Yeah, I don't see anything else leaking. I think we're good. I think I got really lucky. Because if I had let it go any longer, I would have definitely done some damage to the motor. You can do damage to the bearings and the cylinders. You can wash away. I know diesel is like an oil, but it's not really. It's not sufficient to be a good lubricant. So I'm just going to go ahead and get an injector. I have a place up in Albany that I can get it from right now. It's about $320, so I'm just going to go up there and get that injector. On my way to D&W Diesel in Albany. They did my injectors last time. It was probably like 3.5 years ago. I'm just taking the whole line off rather than bend it out of the way or something. So inside the head here, starting from here, this is a cross tube, and this goes into the injector, and there's a little like dimple on the side that it goes into, and it seals up against it too. So in order to take the injector out, you have to take this out too. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'll take off the rocker arm and the electrical connections, and then take off the hold down. These kind of have like a keyway. See those little balls right there? They make it so that you can only put it one way. So luckily this is the first cylinder right here, because all the way there in the back is a lot harder to get to. But luckily, when I had the injectors done before, 3 through 6 were done. So it's only 1 and 2 that were left, which is the easiest ones. So now I have access to get that injector right out of there. Look how dirty that nozzle is. Like I said, I didn't have any problems with this thing running bad or starting hard or anything like that. The only thing it was doing was leaking fuel into the oil. So here's the new injector. And I also got a new cross tube, and it's got a new O-ring on it. You want to make sure that dimple faces towards the cross tube. Once it clicks in there, then I can put my crossover tube in and turn it until the crossover tube can go in it. So when you're installing this injector, you want to put the injector hold down on, put the bolts snug, put your cross tube in, make sure it clicks. Same thing with the injector, you make sure that clicks. When you put them both in, then you torque down, you pre-torque these bolts right here to 44 inch-pounds. Then you want to pre-torque your cross tube to 11 foot-pounds. Then you want to do a final torque on these 8mm bolts for the injector at 89 inch-pounds. Then you want the final torque on the feed tube to be 37 pounds. And put these injector connectors back on. You only want these connectors about 11 inch-pounds. Rocker arm should be 27 foot-pounds. If you were doing more than one injector, you should probably also adjust your valves while you're at it. But I recently had these valves adjusted, so I don't need to do that. Now you can put this fuel line back on. It's important that you put another wrench on the cross tube holder nut while you're tightening the fuel line, because otherwise you're going to change the torque value if you tighten it up too much. So now you can install the grid heater and the intake horn. For those of you that don't know, this doesn't have glow plugs. This has what they call a grid heater, which heats the incoming air to the motor. Cummins are known for starting pretty good in cold weather. Now I just got to hook back up these wires right here and this holder right here. Put the intake onto the intake horn and then put the valve cover on. I think the reason for this coupler being so enlarged is probably because of the diesel that was going through it, because it normally shouldn't have diesel. I can't think of any other reason why it would do that. I'm not even going to bother putting a top cover on this because I know I need to replace this piece right here. I'm gonna find a new piece for here, but for right now, I'm not gonna make it hold up everything I'm doing. I still wanna test this out. The only thing this really does is guide the oil down to the bottom of the motor, because this is a breather tube. So right now, if it's got any oil coming out, it's just gonna dribble over the valve cover, but it's not gonna hurt anything. So I'll get that fixed in the next few days. These valve cover bolts, some of them don't even have an O-ring. Like this one's old, worn out, and this one doesn't even have one. So I should have everything I need here. I have like 3 different sets of these O-rings for every single kind you can imagine. So I think we're going to be looking at one of these. I'm just going to place this on here to check for blow-by. I'm going to put you guys in the hood for a minute and take a test drive here. Put you right next to the turbo. It sounds really nice. Okay, so I've been driving this for a few days, putting a bunch of miles on it. I've been checking on it to make sure that it's not leaking still. I've been checking the oil to make sure that the level is good. And I've also been checking for leaks. And the nice thing about the fact that it's on cylinder 1 is I can check right in here to make sure that I don't see any dye. Because I'm looking right at the injector right there. It's not really showing up on camera, but you can look in there and see that there's no dye anywhere. So I still need to get this piece right here. I ordered it. It should be in a few days. But for right now, I'm gonna call this good. This is fixed. I know I didn't do a lot of diagnosis in the beginning of this video. That's because I was kind of pondering on it while I was doing the transfer case, kind of looking at the evidence as I was doing the transfer case, because I was underneath there. I could see everything that was going on. The oil was coming from the top of this valve cover, because I thought at first that it would be the valve cover gasket, but it definitely wasn't. It was just leaking on top of that. So pretty much the oil was coming out right here, and it was just dripping down the sides and the back, and it was just getting all over the place. Something that contributed to it probably was these valve cover bolts here, because a few of them were damaged or didn't even have an O-ring on them. So it might have been leaking a little bit out there, but probably not enough to even do anything. So between this and the transfer case, they both kind of popped out of nowhere, and I didn't expect it. It kind of delayed me from doing some other stuff. But now that this is done, that's good. I can move forward and get on to these other projects. So I'll see you guys on those. By the way, the transfer case is still working great, and also the vibration that I had at high speeds with the front drive shaft is not there anymore. So I was gonna possibly get that balanced, but I don't even need to now.